Former U.S. president is returning to Washington, D.C., set to make a court appearance just hours from now to confront yet another historic indictment. Joining us now with reaction is Allan Litchtman, a presidential historian at American University. Good morning to you, Allan.
Good morning.
All right, so 3 indictments in 4 months. I got a 2-part question for you. How is this one different, and just how big of a deal is all of this?
Yeah, this one is different because it cuts to the heart of the survival of our democracy. I'm not diminishing the other 2 indictments. It's pretty serious for a former president to be jeopardizing our national security by stealing national security documents and mishandling them so badly. But this indictment, I have to tell you, is the most significant indictment in the history of the country, more significant than the indictments of the Watergate conspirators, more significant than the indictments of the alleged atomic bomb spies. And I'll tell you why. Because the indictment alleges that the president of the United States, who should be a beacon for democracy in this country and around the world, was engaged in a conspiracy to undermine and destroy a democracy that's lasted since the 1780s. And if he's not held accountable, then American democracy is in great peril. And by the way, so is Canadian democracy and democracy all over the world, which depends in great part on American leadership. You know, democracy is precious, Melissa. And like all precious things, though, it can be destroyed. And we have to remember that. In the golden age of democracy after World War I, there were about 24 democracies. By the 1940s, that had been cut down more than half.
You know, and it's something that we're talking about democracy, that we're talking about the health of democracy and just how important that is. I wonder, as a historian, what does it mean to you to see that democracy, something we've kind of taken for granted, it's always going to exist, that there is this threat?
Yes, as an historian, I fully understand, as I mentioned, that, as Thomas Jefferson said, I'm paraphrasing, democracy, liberty requires ever vigilance. You cannot take it for granted. Prior to this time, obviously, the greatest threat to American democracy was the secession and the Civil War. But we are now facing a fundamental threat. And here's what I think is so disturbing. It's not just Donald Trump. It's the great bulk of the Republican Party is uniting behind Donald Trump, trying to excuse his attempt to destroy our democracy and trying to deflect blame to others. Listen to what the Republicans are saying. It's the weaponization of the Department of Justice. Why aren't we prosecuting Joe Biden when they have no facts indicating Joe Biden has committed any kind of serious crime? But think of what they have not dealt with, the substance of the charges, which are so serious. It's just chilling that an entire party seems to have been corrupted by Donald Trump. Everything he touches, he corrupts.
And we're talking about a president who's been twice impeached as well. So if nothing up until now has led Republican leaders who are supporting Trump to split away from him, what would it take for anything to change?
I don't know what it would take. Maybe if he was convicted of, these very serious charges by Jack Smith, but it's not clear that even that would change any Republican minds. Here's what's so astonishing. Since the days of Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge back in the 1920s, Republicans have claimed to be the party of law and order. During the impeachment of Bill Clinton back in the late 1990s, the top Republicans were saying no one is above the law, including a sitting president. Everybody has to be held accountable. And now, when Donald Trump is accused of vastly more serious things than Bill Clinton, who was accused of covering up a consensual affair, what has happened to the law and order Republicans? What has happened to the Republicans who say we backed the blue and don't seem to care about the some 140 police officers injured during the January 6th insurrection? What happened to the Republicans who are shouting that Democrats wanted to defund the police, who are now talking about defunding the FBI, one of the most conservative institutions in Washington, now that they're defending Donald Trump? What has happened to Republican principles? It's appalling. And that's why this serious threat to our democracy goes beyond Donald Trump.
Allan, you have a reputation of making accurate predictions. You called that Trump was going to win the election when he did. You called that Biden was going to win the election when he did. You called the 2 presidential impeachments that they would go through, and not to mention presidential elections over the past 4 decades. So when you're looking into your crystal ball, what do you think is going to happen here with Trump in court and with the upcoming election next year in the U.S.? Are you ready to make a prediction on any of those?
Let's see, how much are you willing to pay me to make a prediction? No, I'm not ready to make a prediction because, as we've just discussed, so much is still up in the air, not just with respect to Trump, but with respect to the economy, what might be happening in the war in Ukraine. But I do believe that Donald Trump will be convicted of one or more of these sets of charges. I also think he will be charged with a 4th set of felonies for interfering with the election in Georgia.
All right, so we got a little bit of a prediction from you there.
A little bit of a prediction there.
We appreciate you joining us today, Allan Litchtman, giving us some perspective on what's happening in the U.S. Of course, we're going to be following that all day today on City News. Take care and good morning to you.
You too.